There are two powers today in Lebanon, the Israelis and Hezbollah. The Lebanese government is very, very, very weak. It's not ready to take any action. But the problem is Hezbollah still possesses the arms, and the Lebanese government is not ready to disarm it.
Israel after October 7th is much more about security first than about let's get to peace. So the first thing that Israel said is we can do negotiations, but first disarm Hezbollah. That's non-negotiable.
As the Iran war shakes the Middle East, Hezbollah has fired missiles into northern Israel, leaving Israeli civilians huddled in bomb shelters. Israel has struck Hezbollah-related targets across Lebanon, including in the capital Beirut, leaving hundreds dead and hundreds of thousands of Lebanese civilians displaced. Rocket fire has intensified throughout the course of recent days.
Hezbollah launched around 200 projectiles into northern Israel.
The Israeli military announced a fresh wave of strikes, and they seem to be pushing further into Beirut.
The Lebanese government has called for negotiations with Israel to end this round of conflict and reach a peace agreement, calls of which both Israel and the U.S. are skeptical of. Amid charges that the Lebanese armed forces have not done enough to rein in Hezbollah, the Lebanese government has announced the outlawing of the Hezbollah militia and announced the expulsion of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards from Lebanese soil. I'm David Makovsky, the host of Decision Points. Welcome, and I'm happy to go on this journey with you. In this episode, we hear from top experts on Lebanon and Hezbollah. How does the U.S. and Israeli war in Iran reshape this round of confrontation? Does the Lebanese government have the means or the will to disarm Hezbollah? What are Israel's military objectives in this round of fighting? And where does all this lead? To answer these questions and more, we have Assaf Orion, a former Israeli brigadier general and fellow at both the Washington Institute and the Tel Aviv-based think tank INSS. In his former capacity, he headed multilateral military talks on the Israeli side with Lebanese military counterparts. And Hanin, senior fellow at the Washington Institute's program on Arab politics, where she focuses on the nexus between Lebanese policy and politics. She's the former managing editor at the Beirut-based Now newspaper. I'm delighted to have you, Hanin, and Assaf back on Decision Points, two real experts who really follow Lebanon so closely. Assaf, maybe I'll start with you. What are Israel's military goals for this campaign against Hezbollah?
Yeah, I think that we're watching the sequel of what we've seen in 2024. Israel's campaign design at the time included degrading Hezbollah's military capability, pushing it away from the border, weakening it as an organization, and continuing those efforts after the ceasefire through both agreements and enforcement. On the one hand, disarmament by the Lebanese army, and on the other hand, almost daily attacks of Israel on Hezbollah and other terror organizations, augmented by an IDF presence in Lebanon, just across the border. Now, I think we're looking at Israel trying to complete the job, get the job done, to degrade whatever is left of the military capability, to weaken it as a whole, including attacking its financial organization, Al-Qard al-Hassan, to weaken its capability to resist enforcement on the one hand and disarmament on the other hand, and also to encourage the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army to actually fulfill their commitment despite the obstacles laid by the Lebanese Armed Forces commander. And since the Lebanese government decided recently to ban the military security capability activity of Hezbollah, but also the activity of the IRGC, we now face, I think, better conditions to implement that, to advance those goals when Hezbollah is isolated in an unprecedented level, including by its usual partner, the Amal party.
So just to be clear, because for a lot of our listeners to see how the relationship between what's going on against Hezbollah and what's going on against Iran What sort of relationship do you see between the two, between the Lebanon front and the Iran front? If the Iran front somehow stops while Iran is still, maybe it's down, it's wobbly, but it's not out, will that affect Israel's ability to achieve what it is doing in Lebanon too? I mean, I assume the goal here is essentially that Lebanon, for all practical purposes, will be able to function like a normal state, that they won't have this state within a state, that, as I say in the Middle East, the people who fire the shots call the shots. You're not going to get the last handgun, of course, but that they won't have a veto on Lebanese decision-making. I'm just trying to think about to what extent does the war in Iran impact the successes in Lebanon?
So I would divide it into several time frames. I think currently what we are seeing is Israel operating in Lebanon as a secondary theater, when the main theater is definitely Iran. Once this is over and high demand for air power subsides, I think it's very probable to see a more intensive land campaign by the IDF into Lebanon, supported by what's being freed from Iran's sky. And the fact that some of the IRGC Quds Force commanders have been sent to their maker doesn't really help the command and control in Hezbollah. But the real importance of Iran, in the sense of for Hezbollah, is actually what happens after wars. The buildup, the financial support, the rearming, the training of people, the political support. So I think in the immediate term fighting, Iran is not so important except as a main effort which will soon become secondary as the war subsides. But in the longer term, it will actually decide whether those achievements of the IDF will be ongoing and sustainable and allow the Lebanese government to extend its monopoly over the use of arms and so on, or it will be just another round of crippling and then regrowth. It's like the same hydra growing its heads back. I'm more optimistic, so I hope it will be the successful one and not failing and returning.
So, Hanin, over to you. I mean, this whole issue of Lebanon banning the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon, caught a lot of people's attention. It seemed like it could have only happened at a time that Iran has been so weakened in this war with the United States and Israel. How do you ensure that there's follow through? And again, I come back to the same thing I asked Assaf, which is if this war ends with Iran weakened but not out, does this hydra come back? How do you see it?
We have to understand that this war is not like any other war in many ways, although it really depends on how it ends. First and foremost, I do not think that this war is going to end with another ceasefire agreement, like the usual ceasefire agreement. It is very obvious, from the Israeli side at least, that they're not going to stop until the army takes over or they will disarm Hezbollah. Disarmament is goal number one. Disarmament means that not only disarming Hezbollah, making sure that the current missiles and drones and the military buildup is destroyed, but also making sure that they cannot rebuild. If this is really the goal and if this really is implemented, then this would be the solution. So another ceasefire agreement is not going to implement this because I do not think that there is trust in the Lebanese armed forces and the Lebanese government anymore. The fact that there's been a year and a half since last war, since the ceasefire agreement, I think there was a lot of time for the Lebanese to disarm Hezbollah, at least south of Litani. Turned out that even south of Litani is not disarmed, that in a year and a half, nothing really happened. So there's a matter of trust that needs to be rebuilt in order to work with the Lebanese government on finishing the job. If the trust cannot be rebuilt and the Lebanese government does not show any signs of seriousness, that is not only words, action that would translate these words, I'm afraid that means that Israel will have to disarm Hezbollah itself. And then comes the next stage, which is how to make sure they're never going to rebuild. And this Israel, unfortunately, cannot do alone. You need U.S. pressure on Lebanon to make sure that the other foundations of Hezbollah, the whole ecosystem of military, politics, and economy, are all dismantled.
So this issue of how do you rebuild trust, and you who follow Lebanon so closely can help us with this, which is that the Lebanese government seems to like to have it both ways, that they can condemn Israel for all these aerial strikes, but benefit from Israel when they do that because they don't want to do the tough work here. I'm just curious of how the Lebanese political system looks at what Israel's doing both in the air and on the ground, and if there's a difference between the way they see either.
Yes, the Lebanese have always played both sides and they continue to play both sides and they will continue to play both sides as long as they feel that Hezbollah could survive this. Meaning that Hezbollah does not really need to win this war, they just have to survive this war. And the Lebanese politicians, the political system in Lebanon, wants to make sure that if Hezbollah is still standing, they don't want to mess with the status quo. The status quo meaning that it works for everybody. No one wants to mess with it. It works for their financial deals. It works for their political deals. It works for the sectarian system where everybody's constituency is wrapped in a certain way. So no one wants to mess with the status quo. No one wants to rock the boat. I think once they realize that Hezbollah is really finished, then we will see a new kind of approach, a new kind of initiative. That's why you see today a lot of words, but no action. That's why you see today the Lebanese armed forces not ready to confront Hezbollah still, despite everything that is happening. They still do not want to confront because they still feel that what if Hezbollah survived this? But more importantly, what if Iran survives this? Because this brings me to the next question, which is if Iran survives this, then Hezbollah will survive this. This is the main issue, that if the regime in Iran continues, sooner or later, it doesn't have to be immediate, but eventually they will continue to rebuild Hezbollah because they need them more than ever today. So let me give you an example of the IRGC. You asked about it earlier. There was news that a number of Iranian diplomat / IRGC members left Lebanon because there was a Russian plane that took them out. It's true. I'm not saying it's not true, but the Lebanese government, again, came out and said, we asked the IRGC to leave Lebanon and they left. So it's true that they did, but the IRGC did not leave Lebanon because the Lebanese government asked them. This defies every logic. They left because the Israelis threatened them and they were attacking them in Lebanon. That's the only reason they left. There are two powers today in Lebanon, the Israelis and Hezbollah. The Lebanese government is very, very, very weak. It's not ready to take any action. But the problem is, David, is whoever possesses the arms has the power to negotiate the next ceasefire agreement or security agreement or even peace agreement. Today, Hezbollah still possesses the arm and the Lebanese government is not ready to disarm it.
So how do you rebuild this trust, Hanin, that you talked about?
So the trust, basically, Lebanon has to do what it has to do for Lebanon, not for Israel. Let's be clear about this. Everybody's saying we don't want to do Israel's job. It's not Israel's job. This is Lebanon's job. So let's be clear about this, that Lebanon needs to rebuild trust because the goal is Lebanon's sovereignty. You have to do this like the rest of the job, which is targeting Hezbollah's financial and political foundations, will come after the war. Now is not the time. Now it's the military. Our focus is on military. But Lebanon can show seriousness in translating some of its words into action, which is basically there are a few things that the Lebanese armed forces has to deploy and stop Hezbollah from going into certain areas in the south or in Beirut. There was an incident yesterday where a Christian village in the south of Lebanon was evacuated because Hezbollah's people were infiltrating it. The army should have been there. A lot of Christian leaders in Lebanon asked the army to be in Christian areas in the south. They refused. This is the least they can do. The Lebanese government should fire the two Hezbollah ministers that are there and taking part in the decision-making about Hezbollah. They should not be there. Hezbollah dragged the country into a war. They should not be part of the government. The prime minister should fire them. The Lebanese state should summon and fire the Iranian ambassador. Why is he still there? There are many things that the Lebanese can do. Summon the Secretary General of the Hezbollah, Naim Assam, for making this decision. Issue an arrest warrant against him. There are a list of things that the Lebanese can do before going into the bigger picture of finishing like the foundation, the financial and political foundations. Start with something that would help rebuild that kind of trust, and then maybe you will be partners in this.
So it was recently Assaf, I think it was the head of the Lebanese armed forces, who made a statement suggesting national unity is above all, and that Hezbollah basically disarmament takes a back seat. How is this seen in Israel?
Well, whenever we are faced with an either-or question, are they unwilling or incapable? In many places, we can assume it's actually both, but we need to understand how it's constructed. The Lebanese armed forces is seeking every way possible to avoid collision with Hezbollah. And the commander recently said in the government meeting, it all needs to be through dialogue and consent. Now, okay, Hezbollah said, I'm not going to disarm. So what's to seek consent, and what's the discourse about? So one of its ways is to go through disarming Hezbollah's arms in South Lebanon by consent, but doing it dragging the feet, procrastination, avoiding places without consent or across the Litani or the northern parts. And another way is to say, look, we are weak, we don't have enough capability, we can't do it. And here you have a double-edged sword. One is a good pretext or excuse for insufficient progress, and two is a leverage for the unending story of trying to get more funds from the outside, to get more support, to get more equipment. And donor states, if they just exalt the importance of the Lebanese armed forces, and they do, and trying to bring donations, if it's not conditions donations, it's just a waste of money. Because the whole Lebanese scheme is promising and not delivering. Hanin said it very, very well, clearly. I think we need to defy the rules of the game and to ask for delivery, for actual performance, for benchmarks. And only this way you can connect support to actual results that are needed.
So do you agree with that, Hanin? This whole issue of conditionality, U.S. conditionality of support for the LAF, the Lebanese armed forces, the Europeans, the Gulf Arabs, should there be some sort of link?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I think after what happened this past week, it goes without saying that the Lebanese armed forces need to be monitored and conditioned, their assistance to the Lebanese armed forces. Because simply one crossroad, I think, in this discussion was when we realized that after a year and a half, and since the last ceasefire and the army's declaration that the south of Litani is now clear and clear of any Hezbollah weapons and presence, turned out that it's the opposite. A lot of the rockets and missiles were launched from south of Litani. And they're there now. Where's the army? So this is a clear crossroad in this discussion. We have to make sure that the Lebanese army deserves this kind of assistance. And I have to say, not everyone in the Lebanese army is the same. A lot of people are not happy with what's going on. The Lebanese army is not just one big unit. It has a commander and the rest have to follow orders. Simple. But the fact that the Lebanese armed forces is acting this way, it doesn't mean that not everybody, it has to be conditioned, and the Lebanese army also has to be cleaned. Those who are coordinating with Hezbollah has to go. Then there should be certain deliverables and thresholds, and accordingly, the assistance should come.
Hanin, I want to continue with you here. On one hand, the Lebanese government just announced that it's willing to have negotiations with Israel to end the war and reach a peace agreement. And so I would wonder, if you can give us background, but I want to read you what a Lebanese MK, prominent Sunni from Beirut, Fouad Makhdoumi, what he just put on Twitter. He said, as important and as crucial as direct negotiations with Israel may be, if they are not coupled with and advance simultaneously with the complete disarmament of Hezbollah and the dismantling of its security, military, and financial infrastructure, they will lead nowhere. Anything else is simply an illusion of progress. As long as a parallel armed structure exists outside the state, Lebanon will remain trapped in the same vicious circle. There could be no real peace, no real sovereignty, and no real state under such conditions. The path forward is clear and unequivocal. One state, one army, one authority over arms.
I totally agree. And I understand your question. The initiative by the president for direct negotiations with Israel is a great opportunity that we should take very seriously. There have been a number of initiatives in Lebanon to have direct negotiations with Israel. The prime minister also expressed willingness to do that, although he did link it to the Arab Peace Initiative, which links the whole peace in Lebanon to the two-state solution. And I think Lebanon cannot afford to link Lebanon to Palestinian issues anymore. So that not everybody took it seriously. But the president's initiative did not mention the Arab Peace Initiative, and it did not mention conditions. Although maybe the idea is to hold negotiations with Israel to have another ceasefire agreement, and that might not be ideal at this point for Israel. But however, it is a great opportunity to say, okay, you want to talk? Let's talk. No conditions. We just have to sit on the table, talk, and discuss long-lasting solutions. That is a peace agreement that will also include a security agreement and economic agreement that benefits both Israel and Lebanon. Definitely that does not negate the effort to disarm Hezbollah, which is now ongoing by Israel and eventually have to be also sealed by the Lebanese government with U.S. help. This has nothing to do with the other. They can be parallel efforts, because eventually, once you have achieved the goal of disarmament, you will have something ready to make sure that no one fills the void. This is one. Two, you, by peace also, and Lebanon signs peace with Israel, you will negate any Hezbollah justification to arm, rebuild, or even talk about resistance, because Lebanon would have had peace with Israel. There are more than two reasons for doing this, but you need to have them together, parallel to each other. One does not negate the other, but also they do benefit each other. So I totally agree with MP Makhzoumi.
Why is this happening now? It's obvious Iran is weaker. They don't feel the pressure of the IRGC like they did. To explain the timing, do you think there are elements in Saudi Arabia and others that are urging them to do it? I saw a podcast of another Lebanese intellectual, Bashar Haidar, with Michael Young, who is also a very prominent voice on the other side of this. And Young was saying the Saudis asked us not to do this. But I guess thinking it would dilute.
No, let me explain.
But I can't believe Lebanon would do this without consulting.
No, the Saudi works with the Prime Minister Nawaf Salah. That's it. He refers to them on everything. So when they tell him that Lebanon will only have peace when Saudi have peace, that is like when it's linked to the Arab Peace Initiative headed by the Saudis back then, this is why he said what he said. So the Saudis work through him, and that's why Young said what he said, because he follows also this atmosphere in Lebanon. However, the president's speech did not come from that. It came from actually an urgency that Lebanon is going through a war, and he thinks that his initiative would reach another ceasefire agreement. He did not put that condition. I don't think it's linked to the Saudis. He did not talk about the Arab Peace Initiative. He did not link it to anything. The Prime Minister Saudi track is very different. You can easily ignore it, focus on the president and think, okay, even if he thinks that this would lead to just another ceasefire agreement, let's tell him, let's talk, but let's talk beyond that. Because this is not just another ceasefire agreement. He is ready for peace. So but he needs also to understand, because he's the de facto commander of the army. He's the chief of the army, right? He's the chief commander of the LAF. So he also needs to understand if anyone's going to sit with him on the table and talk about this, the army will have to do its job as well. If you tell Joseph Aoun, the president, that yes, we will sit and talk about, we'll take your initiative seriously, then he will also have to do something from his side to parallel this with more LAF engagement and involvement.
As you follow Lebanese politics, your fingers on the pulse, right? There's no good polling data on these questions. So you as an analyst trying to understand where's the public in Lebanon, what are the metrics that you're looking at that would say what the president said about peace with Israel is popular? How does the president know where is the public when he comes out with a statement like this?
He knows that the public has shifted. Yes, Christians, not all Christians, but most Christians, most of the Druze, yes, some of the Sunnis are pro-peace, not all of them actually. Yes, the Shia were not necessarily pro-Hezbollah, but they were definitely not thinking about peace as an option. But however, he knows that saying this today would actually also relate to the Shia, because I have to tell you, after this war, when Hezbollah decided to support the Iranian regime instead of thinking about its own constituency, the Shia saw it. And after this war, something really big has shifted. There's a lot of reckoning among the Shia population that if you tell them today...
So how do you measure that? How do you measure that?
You don't have numbers, but you see it. You see it everywhere. This is what people are talking about it, even within the Shia population. You see it on social media. You see it on the WhatsApp groups of all these Shia people really blaming Hezbollah for this. We don't have numbers, but this is the general impression. I cannot measure it at this point, but I can see it. I can feel it professionally and personally, because I am also from the South, and most of my family and friends are Shia from the South. So I can feel it among these people that even those who supported Hezbollah 2 weeks ago, today they're not. Those people I talked to, they're not supporting Hezbollah today. They're blaming Hezbollah. So that's why another thing that would support this argument is that if we have gone to the elections on time, if you do elections now, Hezbollah will lose even among the Shia. That's why the parliament only met once on Monday to give itself another 2 years, extend it for itself another 2 years, because Nabi Berri called for this, and he knows more than anyone else that if we do elections on time...
Just for our listeners who don't know Nabi Berri, he's the leader of Amal, who you have documented has worked very closely with Hezbollah, but is officially a step removed. And when it's convenient, he could sound critical. Is that fair?
He's Hezbollah's ally, full stop. He needs them. Hezbollah's financial, business, and political deals are too strong for him to detach himself. Let's not be mistaken. So the parliament he knew that if they do elections on time, the Shia might not vote for them. So they gave themselves 2 years, hoping that the Shia per se will forget in 2 years if the regime survives. That's exactly why the parliament was extended for 2 years, because the people are angry. The Shia are also very angry. There are 500,000, if not more, people in the streets today with no one from Hezbollah checking on them. So this is unprecedented. So it's a huge shift within the population.
And you're saying if the political leaders didn't like what Aoun was doing, they'd find ways to make their criticism very known.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And that isn't happening either.
No,
There's been no outcry against Aoun saying, I want a peace negotiation with Israel.
On the contrary, the peace part was hugely supported by the Lebanese people. I'm telling you, Lebanon today wants peace with Israel more than ever. The question is does Israel want peace with Lebanon?
So that's my question to Assaf. Over to you, Assaf.
I think that Israel after October 7th is much more about security first than about let's get to peace. And in the Lebanese context, it's a kind of a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. It's a collision between two approaches. One is relation-centric, declaration-centric, promise-centric, and the other is fact-based and performance-based. We want to see the results. So the first thing that Israel said is we can do negotiations, but first disarm Hezbollah. So that's non-negotiable. Then you could see a situation in which Israel insists on taking the opportunity to hit Hezbollah once more to degrade what's left, as I said in the beginning, and then sit down to discuss the issues, the state monopoly over the arms, disarming not only Hezbollah, but also the Palestinian terror groups, to commit to it, and then to commit to a timetable and to a measurable way of doing it, to make sure that it's not a revolving door, collecting arms and returning them to Hezbollah by the back door. And it needs to be well monitored. But we also have an opportunity, since Shara is in Damascus, to close up the Shaba farms pretext, which used to be a story about Israeli occupation as an excuse or an explanation of justification of the resistance. So I think, given time, Israel is open for negotiation. It's actually demanded or proposed and then pushed to add a civilian official to the military talks. That's a good signal on the side of Israel. But this is not going to be an easy way forward, as the conditions are yet to be created by a military campaign, followed by possible arrangements, security arrangement, and so on. We just need to remember another issue, which is the new Israeli thinking about forward presence inside Lebanon, and for that matter, inside Syria, inside Gaza, and so on. And it's more than a coincidence that when Israel issued a warning to the South Lebanon population to evacuate north of the Litani, the maps attached to this warning included a yellow line on the Litani River. Now, yellow line immediately needs to remind us of Gaza, where Israel holds half of the strip to make sure that Hamas doesn't come near the communities. And this being an election year, I don't expect Israel withdrawing back from its forward presence before the elections. So on the timeline and so on, this year could be used to begin negotiations and talks. Again, security first and then other issues. By the way, not many other issues are serious disagreements between Israel and Lebanon. There are minor territorial issues. There are minor water issues. There is the issue of the Palestinian refugees, that if it's insisted that they are part of the deal, it will be a problem. But all other bilateral issues are very soluble.
This gets to an interesting point, which is here we have two creative minds who've been working this issue. I've been trying on the side to see what can be done. I do wonder if there is a value, and if the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of Lebanon, would say, each of them would make a statement saying we have no territorial designs to annex either side's territory, which this isn't the West Bank with all how fraught that is. But that would be something that I don't think would be too dangerous for this prime minister to say, even in an election year, because there's no real constituency for expanding in settlements into Lebanon. But I'm trying to think something that would give it momentum. And maybe in this final round here, and Hanin, maybe you could start us off. The president and President Trump, we haven't really talked about. The president has done all this outreach to Syria, but he's not invited the president of Lebanon to the White House. I'm trying to think if the United States could play a role in facilitating this kind of initiative that would promote Lebanon-Israeli peace. It does seem the most hopeful, for all of the complexities that has been listed here in the podcast, but it does seem that it's an area where battlefield changes could have an impact on a policy where Lebanon takes its country back for its own reasons, but yet at the same time enjoys a normalization with Israel and vice versa. Hanin, what do you think?
1, 2, 3 is basically one, get the Lebanese armed forces to do their job. At this point, there are certain things that can be done, starting with deployment to making sure Hezbollah doesn't infiltrate certain areas, especially the Christian towns in the south, but also follow up on like disarmament to a certain extent, just so show some seriousness. We understand that during the war, you cannot be doing the whole disarmament plan, but there are still certain things that can be done. Two, the diplomatic part from the government itself, not just the RAF, which is doing the steps that I talked about earlier, from summoning the Iranian ambassador, firing the Hezbollah ministers, issuing arrest warrants against Naim Assam, Hamad Rad, and everybody who was involved in this catastrophe, the people who actually caused all this war. Three, basically, it can be related to the borders, especially the Lebanese-Syria border. Hezbollah fired rockets at Syria 2 days ago. And this is a huge development because they're doing what the Iranians are doing, like making, in Lebanon we say alayhi wa ala a'da'i, making sure that Cyprus, Syria, Israel are going to be hit by Hezbollah, creating pressure on all neighboring countries. This might lead to a disastrous confrontation between the Syrian army and the Lebanese army, and we cannot afford this as well. So they need to control Hezbollah at the borders as well. These are one of the many things that can be done, but they got to do something.
Last word over to you, Assaf, which is, how do you see this? Are there things that the United States can do that would facilitate Lebanese-Israeli talks?
Well, I think we're watching the scenario when another Israeli campaign in Lebanon is very probable. But to make it lasting and useful, I think we need to build on what Hanin just said, and that is the fact that Hezbollah is a subset of the Iranian problem. Now, on Iran, there are several points noteworthy. Israel and the U.S. see eye to eye at the heart of the problem. So actually, this concert of agreement working together can be extended to Lebanon. Both the president and the Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke about the grievances of Iran against both the U.S. and Israel. They can say the same about Hezbollah. On the prescription, they can both agree that the monster needs to be defanged, so it needs to lose its capabilities to threaten its neighbors, and the neighbors are Israel, Cyprus, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, wherever Hezbollah went, but also needing to make sure they don't reconstitute. So we're not only talking about how to frame the campaign and design it, but also how to build the reality of after the campaign to have a lasting peace. Here we can both expect, and I think recommend, that Israel defines the goal of this campaign as disarmament of Hezbollah, and say it. After this is done, after the militias in Lebanon are disarmed, we can go to peace. This is our only condition in this sense. And on the U.S. side, it can both, on the uppermost level, provide a presidential cover and saying, okay, this is another one of the peace agreements that I'm bringing to the Middle East. And on the practical level, this mechanism built after 24 is actually a good recipe to implement whatever's been agreed in the aftermath. So I think there is also hope and not just, staring into the barrel.
Well, that's a good way to end it, because there's been so many different rounds between Hezbollah and Israel. It used to be Israel and Lebanon. There were times of operations like that, but now there's a chance that maybe the government of Lebanon could see the weakening of Hezbollah as an opportunity to restore its own sovereignty after decades of it being taken away from Lebanon by Hezbollah. So we will see. Are we on the cusp of some hopeful change in Lebanon? This is to be seen, but that is something we don't always get even the chance of. So I hope that we are able, all of us in the United States, Lebanon, and Israel, to not just discern dangers, but to seize an opportunity. I want to thank you both Hanin Ghaddar and Assaf Orion, for being with us and illuminating this other front of the war that is sometimes forgotten, but I think is very important. So thank you very much for joining us today on Decision Points.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Hanin.
Thank you very much, David, for having us.
Bye.
Thank you, Assaf.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Decision Points. If you like this episode, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and review to help us build our community. And be sure to subscribe and keep listening throughout the season. There's a lot to unpack. I'm David Makovsky.